Another big highlight of the day was Prime Minister Modi's address to the US Congress. It's what they call the American Parliament, situated in the iconic Capitol building. The Indian leader addressed a joint session of the US Congress, the only Indian leader to do so twice. The first time he did it was in 2016. Yesterday was the second time. Only a handful of world leaders have done this, the likes of Winston Churchill and Benjamin Netanyahu. So what was different from his 2016 speech? For starters, the length. The first one was about 45 minutes, this one around an hour. And what did the Prime Minister talk about? Well, everything from trade to technology and defense to democracy. This is what he said about India-US relations.
In the past few years, there have been many advances in AI, artificial intelligence. At the same time, there have been even more momentous development in another AI, America and India.
It's already trending. AI, America and India, he said. He also spoke about the growing defense ties.
At the turn of century, now the United States has become one of our most important defense partners. I would say the scope of our cooperation is endless. The potential of our synergies is limitless. And the chemistry in our relations is effortless.
But cooperation is impossible without people, and in this case, the Indian Americans. So the Indian leader spoke about the Samosa Caucus. It's what they call a group of Indian Americans in the US Congress.
There are millions here who have roots in India. Some of them sit proudly in this chamber. And there is one behind me who has made history. I'm told that the Samosa Caucus is now the flavor of the house. I hope it grows and brings the full diversity of Indian cuisine here.
So friendship is great, but India and US share a common challenge too, and that is China. And Prime Minister Modi spoke about China in perhaps the strongest possible terms yet. As always, he did not name the country, but what he said stands out.
A region where all nations, small and large, are free and fearless in their choices, where progress is not suffocated by an impossible burdens of debt. Where connectivity is not leveraged for strategic purposes, where all nations are lifted by the high tide of shared prosperity.
The other issue he tackled was the Ukraine war. The Prime Minister reiterated that this was the era of peace.
With the Ukraine conflict, war has returned to Europe. It is causing great pain in the region. Since it involves major powers, the outcomes are severe. Countries of the global south have been particularly affected. The global order is based on the respect for the principle of the UN Charter. Peaceful resolution of disputes and respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity.
He spoke about how the war affects the global south. And that's a region whose cause India has championed. The Prime Minister is pushing to include the African Union in the G20.
As we emerge out of the pandemic, we must give shape to a new world order. Consideration, care, and concern are the need of the hour. Giving a voice to the global south is the way forward. That is why I firmly believe that the African Union be given full membership of G20.
Throughout his speech, there was one common thread: the focus on India's democratic credentials.
Democracy is the spirit that supports equality and dignity. Democracy is the idea that welcomes debate and discourse. Democracy is the culture that gives wings to thought and expression. India is blessed to have such values from times immemorial. In the evolution of the democratic spirit, India is the mother of democracy.
Prime Minister Modi wrapped up the speech with a poem that he said he once wrote. Listen to this.
I am reminded of a poem that I once wrote. आसमान में सिर उठाकर, आसमान में सिर उठाकर, घने बादलों को चीरकर, रोशनी का संकल्प ले, अभी तो सूरज उगा है। अभी तो सूरज उगा है। दृढ़ निश्चय के साथ चलकर, दृढ़ निश्चय के साथ चलकर, हर मुश्किल को पार कर, घोर अंधेरे को मिटाते, घोर अंधेरे को मिटाने अभी तो सूरज उगा है।
This speech resonated with Congress members. There were a total of 15 standing ovations, 79 rounds of applause. And when the Prime Minister finished, Congress members rushed to meet him. Some wanted an autograph, others wanted a selfie with him. All in all, a very successful second address of the US Congress, one that attests to India's growing global stature. Biden may be basking in the success of Prime Minister Modi's visit. As it wraps up today, he'll have to work on his domestic challenges. And top of the list is economy. The last few months have been all about the economy in the US. You may remember the debt ceiling drama. Only last month, President Biden had to cancel the Quad summit to deal with the debt ceiling issue. So economy is clearly one of his bigger challenges. There have been fears of recession in America. The projections differ, but they all point to one direction. The pain is not going away in a hurry. When Biden met the press after holding talks with Prime Minister Modi, he did not waste the opportunity to highlight what he's doing about it and how engagements with India will help America and American families. For example, the Air India deal with Boeing. It could create 1 million American jobs across 44 states. Biden's message for the middle class and his core voter base was clear. He was trying to work for them. They've suffered the worst of America's economic pressures. For months, there was crippling inflation in the US. Everything was getting more and more expensive. That seems to have cooled off for now. Eggs are cheaper, so is gas. But does that mean the worst is over? The US Fed chair says, no, it's not. That's the head of their central bank. This is what he said.
inflation has moderated somewhat since the middle of last year. Nonetheless, inflation pressures continue to run high, and the process of getting inflation back down to 2% has a long way to go.
This has been a long battle for the US Federal Reserve. They have raised interest rates multiple times, 10 hikes in 14 months, and that's a lot. Central banks hike interest rates to cool the economy. How does that work? Well, more interest rates mean higher borrowing costs. So a consumer will immediately spend less. And once spending falls, demand falls too. And it leads to a dip in the price of everyday goods, so lower inflation. Now, for the US Fed, the hikes were a desperate attempt, an attempt to get prices back to normal. They may have skipped one rate hike last week, but the war is not over yet. What does that mean? Well, simply put, there could be more rate hikes in America. In the month of May, US inflation rate was 4.1%. That's the lowest it has been since March 2021. But it remains nearly double of 2%. 2% is the rate that the Fed considers healthy, 2% inflation. Right now, it's more than double of that. Now, it has eased a bit, but there's another problem that persists. The crisis within the housing sector. Commercial real estate is struggling in America. Thousands of offices are empty in top cities, the likes of New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Going by one claim, in New York alone, vacant office space could fill more than 26 Empire State buildings. The golden days of buying and flipping houses for money is also over. Investors are losing money on 1 in every 7 homes that they sell. Imagine that, 1 in 7. It's the highest rate since 2016. Also, why are so many offices empty? Because people are not coming back to work. So workplaces are ending their leases and moving to smaller offices. The US economy is losing steam, and it did not happen overnight. A series of events led to this. At the beginning of this year, multiple American banks failed. We've been telling you about this. Then came the layoffs. The tech industry, which is a key economic driver, slashed jobs by the thousands. The US stock market has flatlined, so everyone is nervous. President Biden needs to revive the spirits, and that's why he needs India for the big ticket orders and to shore up his own economic record. And I know it sounds ironic. The world's biggest economy needs a hand from a developing power. But that's what it has come down to. You need steady friends sometimes to get through the hard times. And that's my cue to tell you about the grand state dinner, a 400-person soiree hosted by the Bidens in honor of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It was certainly a high-stakes dinner, but you see, it was also so much more, because Modi brought a secret weapon to the house, his comedy game. Seriously, he kept the audience in stitches. There were distinguished names and titans of industry. They had a vegetarian bash, because for the first time in recent history, the state dinner was entirely plant-based. It was also an unlikely celebration of fashion, replete with sequins and saris. We'll tell you all about it. Also, go back to the basics. Why is the tradition of state dinner such a big deal? And which ones have been the most memorable ones? Here's a report.
Creamy risotto infused with saffron, crisped millet cakes, portobello mushrooms. Looks delicious, right? But don't worry, we are not here to talk about elevating the mushroom, and our intention isn't to make you hungry. We are only talking about the White House State Dinner, held in honor of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which for the first time in recent history was entirely plant-based. That means no meat, no dairy, and no eggs. All thanks to the guest of honor, who is a strict vegetarian.
As some of you may know, Prime Minister Modi is a vegetarian. So we asked Chef Nina Curtis, a plant-based pioneer, to work with our White House chefs and create a stunning vegetarian menu.
And stunning it was. The food married classic American ingredients with distinctly Indian elements. In a palatable homage to India's rich cuisine, the food prominently featured saffron, a signature flavor of Indian cuisine, whose color is closely associated with the Hindu culture. And notice the nod to millet in the dishes, which makes complete sense. India is the world's leading millet producer, accounting for 20% of the global output. Prime Minister Modi has even promoted millets for global benefit on the world stage. Because here's more than a grain of truth. This wasn't just any meal. The dinner was about high-stakes diplomacy. So the menu was chosen with PM Modi's needs and preferences in mind. After all, the gala dinner was in his honor. And speaking of gala, just look at the guest list. Around 400 guests were invited to the dinner, an eclectic mix of government officials, business leaders, star athletes, and renowned artists. Business tycoons like Mukesh Ambani, who was there along with his wife Neeta, Anand Mahindra, Sundar Pichai, Chief Executive of Alphabet, Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, iconic tennis player Billie Jean King, filmmaker M. Night Shyamalan. In addition to this mix, a clutch of high-profile fashion figures attended, including designer Ralph Lauren and Indian entrepreneur Karishma Swali. Now the Biden administration tends to shy away from conversations about style, but the gala was clearly a friendly overture to the world of fashion, with sequins, saris, and saffron silks. But despite this pomp and pageantry, something else completely stole the show. The camaraderie between Biden and Modi, which was engulfed in heartwarming laughs. See for yourself.
Mr. Prime Minister, I had an Irish grandfather named Ambrose Finnegan, and he used to say that when you give a toast and you don't have any alcohol in your glass, you must do it with your left hand. You think I'm kidding? I'm not.
And we'll tell you what we aren't kidding about. How PM Modi brought his ace comedy game to the dinner. He cracked jokes about the time President Joe Biden wanted him to eat even though he was fasting, and about his lack of singing chops, referring to South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol, who surprised guests by getting up on stage during a White House state dinner, honoring him in April, and belted out a rendition of American Pie, one of his favorite songs.
Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't have one more step. I can't remember if I tried when I read about his willow bride. Something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
This was definitely one of the most memorable state dinner moments. What were the others? State dinner for King George VI in 1939, when a British monarch set foot on American soil for the first time, and 200 years after the US declared its independence from Great Britain.
FDR invited King George VI and his wife Elizabeth to
A state dinner saw dance floor diplomacy.
Go to bed that night.
In 1976, then American President Gerald Ford danced with the late Queen of England. So did Princess Diana with John Travolta in 1985 in a state dinner by President Ronald Reagan. Then in 1987, in his first visit to the US, then Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev arrived in Washington to sign the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. And last year, President Biden spent his first state dinner with French President Emmanuel Macron. They had hot dogs and partied until 1 a.m. You see, Washington state dinners are nights of glitzy entertainment. But don't be mistaken, under that guise, they are a chance to push foreign dignitaries to align with American interests. It looks like song and dance, but it's geopolitics. We'll tell you what we are talking about. The first state dinner was held in 1874 by President Ulysses Grant for King David Kalakaua of Hawaii to strengthen trade. In 1959, President Dwight Eisenhower invited Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, because he wanted to thaw Cold War tensions after the launch of Sputnik. In 2015, President Barack Obama hosted President Xi Jinping of China, before which the two countries negotiated for weeks over an arms control accord for cyberspace. Washington state dinners are aimed at strengthening political partnerships overseas, and Prime Minister Modi knows this well. But he seems to have hit a home run, all while cracking up his audience.
Now let's tell you about the takeaways from this visit. A lot of agreements have been signed. We'll tell you about the 5 big deals. Number 1 is jet engines. India and America will jointly produce jet engines. And this is very significant. It involves America's General Electric and India's Hindustan Aeronauticals Limited. GE will share the technology. HAL will make the engines. This is critical technology transfer from the United States to India, the first of its kind, and it's being called as consequential as the 2008 nuclear deal. Second on the list is the drone deal. We've been telling you about this for days now. It's official. India will buy 31 drones from the United States, 15 for the Indian Navy and 8 each for the Army and the Air Force. Now, there's a Make in India component here too. The drones will be assembled in India. Its maker, General Atomics, will set up a facility in India. Deal number 3 is semiconductors. Again, multiple agreements on this front. There are investments to assemble and test chips in India, also to set up research and training centers. 3 companies will make major investments: Micron Technology, Applied Materials, and Lam Research. Now, deal number 4 is space collaboration. India has joined the Artemis Accords. This is an American initiative, the Artemis Accords. It aims to take humans to the moon by 2025 and to expand space cooperation to Mars and beyond. India has joined this initiative. As part of this, India and the US will undertake a joint mission in 2024. This will be at the International Space Station. Both countries will conduct space activities together. And finally, deal number 5, the decision to settle 6 trade disputes at the WTO, or the World Trade Organization. Now, India and America had multiple outstanding disputes at the WTO. Washington has decided on something like an out-of-court settlement. It is also withdrawing tariffs. Customs duties on 28 items are now gone. Taxes on Indian steel and aluminium, plus duties on American chickpeas, lentils, almonds, walnuts, apples, all of these things have been withdrawn. And all of these were introduced during the Trump era. You would remember he used to keep complaining about taxes in India, so Trump had launched a mini trade war of sorts with India, and India had hit back with retaliatory tariffs. This war is now ending. And these were the 5 big deals, the major announcements. These were all complicated, long pending issues. But in the spirit of looking beyond differences, both sides have now resolved them. They're focusing on economic ties built on 3 key pillars: technology transfer, co-development, and co-production. They're looking to leverage each other's strength. The US, its technology, and India, its giant workforce.
And with this visit, we're demonstrating once more how India and the United States are collaborating on nearly every human endeavor and delivering progress across the board. From designing new ways to diagnose and treat illnesses like cancer and diabetes, to collaborating on human spaceflight, including sending an Indian astronaut to the International Space Station in 2024, to accelerating the global clean energy transition and tackling the climate crisis.
Among the other agreements, the US Navy will be able to make a stop in Indian shipyards. There is a pact on critical minerals. India has joined the Mineral Security Partnership. It's a US-led effort involving 12 countries. Then there is some relief on the visa front. Indians will not have to travel back home to renew or restamp their visas. They're opening more consulates. India will have a new one in Seattle. And Indian defense liaison officials will now be stationed in American defense commands. A lot of this would have been unthinkable a few decades ago, but now it is being done. Speaking of economic challenges, let's talk about Turkey too. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is having a change of heart, and Ankara has taken a major U-turn. What are we talking about? Let's start with the latest. Turkey's central bank has raised interest rates from 8.5% to 15%. That's almost double. It's the first rate hike since December 2020. It has caught both the market and experts by surprise.
The size of the rate hike was not expected, although the direction was expected, because after Mehmet Şimşek was appointed, when he mentioned that there is nothing but to return to rationality, there's going to be transparency and consistency, we assumed that turn to rationality implied a turn to orthodox policies. And with a 40% inflation, if you want to implement orthodox policies, what you have to do is tight monetary policy.
Basically, the central bank in Turkey has made borrowing more expensive. We just talked about it. The higher the interest rate, the more expensive borrowing becomes. This is simple economics. The bank says this is a gradual process to bring down inflation. and to bring it down to 5%, which is quite an ambitious target. But why is Ankara doing all of this and all of a sudden? I'll give you some context. Turkey's economy is in a mess, and it's been like that for quite a while now, especially under President Erdogan. Inflation, unemployment, weakening currency, it's all breaking records. Look at the numbers. As of May this year, inflation was more than 39%. At its peak last year, it was more than 85%, the highest in 24 years, 85% inflation. Unemployment was more than 10% in April this year, April 2023. And Turkey's currency, the lira, has lost more than 80% of its value against the US dollar in the last 5 years. The economic crisis in the country is severe, to say the least. Next question. How did they end up here? Time for a story. You see, the two E's of Turkey, Erdogan and economy, have had a love-hate relationship. When he became prime minister in the year 2002, Erdogan inherited a broken economy. Gradually, he tried to fix it. The result was this. Poverty and unemployment plunged. Inflation that was once in triple digits came down to 5%. And this helped him gain popularity over the years. But then things changed. Erdogan changed. Cut to 2016. He was the president of Turkey then, in 2016 too. A coup attempt to overthrow him was foiled. An emergency was imposed. And it's around this time that things began going south for the economy. Analysts call it a whole of its own making. In fact, economy had become such a big issue, even in the elections this year, the one which Erdogan won only narrowly. Voters had little hope that things would change if he came back to power.
I'm not sure what to expect. I think things will get worse because foreign currency and gold prices are on the rise and the economy is bad. It won't be a problem for the rich, but life will become more difficult for those with lower incomes and pensioners.
Well, now he's back in power and he's trying to undo the damage he did to the economy, which brings me to the next question. What did Erdogan do to the economy? Simply put, lack of planning and excessive control on the central bank. You see, the central bank is responsible for monitoring and keeping all key economic metrics under control. When things go south, this bank tries to take measures to contain it. Let's take the current example. To contain inflation, you're hiking interest rates. This is the conventional wisdom. You make borrowing expensive. The circulation of currency falls. So demand and prices of goods goes down. Eventually, inflation goes down. To tackle high inflation, hiking interest rates is a key starting point. But what did Turkey do? The exact opposite. When inflation was rising in the country, they cut interest rates. From 19% in 2021, they lowered rates to 8.5% in March. Why? Because Erdogan. Apparently, he hates the idea of hiking interest rates. He calls himself an enemy of this idea. And rising rates, quote unquote, the mother of all evil. So he tried solving inflation by cutting interest rates. And because Erdogan believed in that, he forced the central bank to play ball, hence the mess. Now he's taking a U-turn to clean up this mess, and he's looking for allies who will help him out. Meet Mehmet Simsek, an economist and former deputy prime minister of Turkey. He's from Erdogan's party, and he's been handpicked as finance minister to get the economy back on track. His appointment has raised eyebrows because he believes in everything that Erdogan is against. But perhaps the president realizes how grave the situation is, which is why he's given this man and the central bank a free hand. But Turkey's problems won't go away immediately. It will take time to fix what the president broke. And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. Ahead of Hajj, pilgrims performed Friday prayers at Mecca's Grand Mosque in Saudi Arabia. A massive hailstorm in Colorado injured concert goers in an amphitheater. The apple-sized hail was caught on camera. Orcas were filmed nudging the rudder of a yacht as it competed in a race near Gibraltar. And finally, what makes the 23rd of June significant? We're taking you back in history to 1757, when the Battle of Plassey was fought. It is remembered as a historic battle and a turning point in the history of India when the British East India Company defeated the Nawab of Bengal, marking the start of nearly 2 centuries of British rule in India. We're leaving you with these. Thanks for watching. See you.
الله لمن حميده ربنا ولك الحمد. الله أكبر. الله.
He's going for it. Get ready, 8-4 down. Wow.